The Colorado State Patrol is using a young man's shooting death as training on when troopers should intervene to stop other officers. But CSP says its trooper charged with failing to intervene in that shooting did nothing wrong. An escalation and the conservative pressure campaign to get a prosecutor to bring criminal charges against librarians and school leaders who won't ban books. The Denver Art Museum has had years to figure out if its art is stolen, and the city auditor isn't satisfied that the museum knows.
Museums, galleries, auction houses, even individual owners should know that the items that they hold were not stolen in the past.
And let's get involved with a big-time holiday goal, getting gifts for 10,000 kids in need in Colorado, as we also unveil a change to your Word of Thanks microgiving campaigns, one that's been years in the making. Tonight on Next. Shake-up tonight among the Democrats who run the state capitol. The two most prominent critics of Democratic leadership within the House have both been removed from a top House committee. It's the two Democrats who sued to force their leaders to comply with open meetings law. Democratic House Speaker Julie McCluskey announced late today that Democratic Representatives Elizabeth Epps and Bob Marshall will not be reappointed to the influential House Judiciary Committee. Last year, it was Epps and Marshall who sued House leadership, alleging that both Democrats and Republicans held secret meetings and used disappearing text messages as they decided whether bills would live or die. They essentially did the public's business outside the public's view. The House changed their policies as a result of the lawsuit. The Speaker said that the punishment for her critics was based on, quote, acrimony in personal relationships. She said the decision was also based on violations of decorum during the special session last month. That's a reference to Epps, who spoke in support of Palestinian civilians while debating an amendment over food benefits. When House leadership allowed Republican Representative Ron Weinberg, who's Jewish, a chance to make a statement in support of Israel, Epps then repeatedly interrupted him and called for him to be ruled out of order. Epps said that Weinberg interrupted her first and that he was, in fact, out of order. We reached out to Epps and Marshall for comment late this afternoon. Have not yet heard back. The Colorado State Patrol is using Christian Glass's death as a training for troopers on when they must intervene to stop police misconduct. Glass was shot and killed after calling for help in Clear Creek County. Yet the head of CSP says his officer on the scene, who faces a criminal charge for failing to intervene, did nothing wrong. Our Steve Stager looks at that apparent contradiction.
My name is Sally Glass.
And I'm Simon Glass.
Two heartbroken parents look straight into the camera to deliver a message.
If any of the officers who were present that night had taken this training and followed the guidance, Christian would be alive today.
This video is part of a settlement with the Glass family, a video all members of the Colorado State Patrol see before they take a specialized training called Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. Training that teaches police to step in and stop a fellow officer before they go too far, and training them to intervene.
All rise.
It's what prosecutors say a group of 6 officers didn't do the night Christian Glass was shot and killed by a Clear Creek County deputy, what brought many of them to a Clear Creek County courtroom Tuesday morning.
23 and 188, Ryan Benny.
CSP Trooper Ryan Benny is one of the 6 officers charged by prosecutors last month for failing to intervene the night of that shooting. He was there that night, his dash cam capturing a warning from his off-scene supervisor over the radio.
Can you ask Clear Creek what their plan is? If there's no crime and he's not suicidal, homicidal, or a grave danger, then there's no reason to contact him.
And Benny talking to the other officers on scene.
My sergeant said that there's no point in contacting him if he's not a harm to himself or anyone else, then no crime.
In the end, those concerns didn't stop police from breaking into Glass's car and didn't stop the shooting. After Benny was charged, his boss, CSP Colonel Matthew Packard, wrote in a statement he was shocked at the charges and said that he reviewed the call and found Benny did not violate CSP policy during it.
Well, there's a disconnect there.
Outside of court Tuesday, Christian's father, Simon, blasted the State Patrol leader.
Is there something going on in the leadership of CSP where they don't understand the severity of this? Are they just thinking this is some minor issue?
As part of that $19 million settlement between all these agencies and the Glass family, CSP also agreed to create a virtual reality training scenario for officers based on the Christian Glass call. The state paid $3 million for the 3 officers on the scene that day, Benny and 2 Colorado gaming enforcement agents. Packard wasn't the only leader to criticize these new charges. The Idaho Springs police chief did too, again defending his officer, saying that the DA applied this law in a blanket way to everyone on scene, and saying that she shouldn't have done that.
It is fair for the public to ask, behind closed doors, what are law enforcement officers saying to one another about the law and whether they intend to comply with it.
Absolutely. And we see this being used as part of a training program for police officers now. So we know that publicly they're saying, get involved and try to stop things from escalating to a certain situation. We just want to know if that's going to be the case when the next time something like this happens.
Steve Staker, thank you.
Yep.
Conservative parents and politicians in Colorado are expanding their current pressure campaign, trying to get a prosecutor to bring criminal charges over some books that they want banned from schools and libraries. Last night, they told El Paso County commissioners that they need to be leaning on the local DA there to help get hundreds of books banned. A coalition of advocacy groups and some Republican state legislators want DA Mike Allen to use obscenity laws to go after librarians and school leaders. DA Allen has not said whether he's going to do that. So last night, advocates showed up to a meeting of the El Paso County commissioners, asked them to put pressure on the district attorney as well as the local public library board to restrict or remove hundreds of books.
Please inform the DA that you stand behind him, pursuing the schools to remove obscene materials and use your influence with the Board of Trustees at Pikes Peak Library District.
And I know that you feel that you cannot say anything to the DA, but as parents, I think that you guys have the right to say that. You have the responsibility to go ahead and say it.
Commissioners listened to 2 hours of public comment like that and made clear they don't have direct oversight over other elected officials or over school district policy. So there is something going on in Colorado right now that would make Santa proud. A nonprofit that plans to get holiday gifts for 10,000 kids in need. 10,000. And a Precious Child is going to do it because they're very good at organizing these enormous efforts and because we're going to help. This week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports a Precious Child's effort to provide holiday gifts to 10,000 children and then some. This is one of our rare annual microgiving campaigns that we've done over and over because it's a chance to do something that is so special for so many families at once. A Precious Child connects with thousands of families up and down the Front Range, tipped off that they're in need by schools, by the foster care system, by domestic violence and homeless shelters, and by other community partners. These are families that are having to prioritize food and rent over holiday gifts this year. Every child should have a gift to open. Precious Child tells me that their 10,000 kid gift list filled up in record time this year. And they called that heartbreaking because the requests for help didn't stop. They kept coming in every day. And that's where we come in, to raise money to buy gifts for kids on that overflow list so that every child in our community can experience the joy and love of the holidays. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to get that link to donate. Even $5 helps, so as always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get us started. And at long last, you can simplify your giving now by setting up a monthly donation to the Word of Thanks Fund. You set it up one time, and your monthly donation will be automatically split between all of the nonprofits that we feature each month. You use the same QR code, the same text to get there, and just look for the green Donate Monthly button. Many of you have been asking for a long time for a way that you can give to each week's nonprofit automatically without putting in your info over and over and over again. I am sorry that it took so long, but it's here, just in time for the holiday season and just in time to help a Precious Child get holiday gifts to more than 10,000 kids. An audit of the Denver Art Museum suggests the curators there are not keeping proper track of city-owned art. And the Supreme Court picks up a case that could restrict abortion access via medication, even in abortion sanctuary states like this one. The U.S. Supreme Court is taking up its first abortion case since overturning Roe v. Wade last year. They're considering restrictions on a commonly used abortion drug, while the justices are rejecting a broader effort to have that drug pulled off shelves. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments on the pill mifepristone. It's typically used along with another medication to carry out more than half of all abortions in the U.S. The Biden administration and the drug maker are appealing a lower court's decision banning mail circulation and limiting access to the pill after 7 weeks of pregnancy. Court's going to hear the appeal, but it is not going to consider an appeal from pro-life advocates who wanted the pill's 20-year-old FDA approval revoked. Court's going to take up that case early next year. We'd expect a ruling by June. Restrictions on mifepristone would impact abortions even in states like Colorado, where abortion is legal. Colorado's Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser and attorneys general from 23 states have put together a brief with the court urging them to overturn any restrictions on that medication. Chris Bianchi's along now, and this is the time of year when even the littlest bit of snow gets people excited, and Denver is getting the littlest bit of snow.
The littlest bit, Kyle. You nailed it. This is what we would term meteorological dandruff that we're seeing right now here in the heart of the metro area. A little bit of light snow outside a lot of your windows right now. Could get a dusting to, in some cases, maybe an inch of snow here in the metro area. That said, southern Colorado, that's where we're talking about the real deal snow. Could be talking about over a foot of snow in a few spots in southern Colorado. That quick shot of snow taking place as we speak here in the metro area. Warmer, drier tomorrow and the rest of the week. AC Doppler radar, pretty busy for us here in eastern Colorado on this Wednesday evening. Up and down the I-25 corridor, we're seeing some of that light to at times moderate snowfall. Highway 50 on south, that's where the heavy stuff is. And that's also, by the way, where temperatures are at or below freezing. Here in Denver right now, yes, we are seeing some snow, but right now the temperature at the airport's 35, south side of town 31, 32. So this snow is going to have a little bit of a tough time sticking on roads, at least initially, but could get a quick coating of snow. I've gotten a few reports here, northern Douglas as well as northern Elbert County, of about a half inch to maybe an inch of snow so far out of this. Again, in some of those cases, that's where we're looking at a little bit of accumulation on the road, so might want to take it easy out there tonight. But south side of town, starting to see some of that snow fill on in. And again, this will continue for the next couple hours or so, mostly light to maybe a brief period of moderate snowfall for us here in the metro area. Again, the heavy stuff is going to be down here into southern and eastern Colorado, and that's where we could be talking about, again, in some cases, a foot plus worth of snowfall. I'll show you those totals in just a second. Denver area, the snow will be done probably by midnight at the very latest, if not a bit before then, and that snow will give way to probably sunny skies during the afternoon hours tomorrow. Southeastern Colorado, that snow holds on until tomorrow morning before it tapers on down. Snowfall amounts, dusting to maybe an inch of snow for us here in Denver, southeastern Colorado, on top of what we've already seen. Could be talking about several more inches of accumulation in that 7-day forecast. Then we get back into the sunshine. It's going to last well into next week. Highs in the 50s until next week.
As the art world reckons with art stolen from countries and brought to the U.S., an audit finds the Denver Art Museum has some explaining to do. Tough year for Colorado's breweries. Another closure announced today. A guy who studies the business of beer lets us know if we're looking at some kind of craft beer crash. Denver's auditor is not convinced that the Denver Art Museum is keeping proper track of city-owned art, almost 3 years after an audit pointed out that very problem. Our Julissa Irizarry explains why art ownership and sales are getting a lot of scrutiny around the world, including here in Denver.
Art and numbers. Some may call them a contradiction. And here, opposites don't attract.
It's about accountability and transparency, and I think that's what we're trying to do.
Denver Auditor Tim O'Brien says of all the cultural facilities he's had to work with, the Denver Art Museum...
Yes, it's been the most challenging.
In 2021, O'Brien released an audit sharing 22 recommendations. The big problems were around ownership and the city's relationship with the museum. O'Brien pointed out the agreement between the two lacks documentation of who owns what.
And the art museum had, a number of pieces of art that didn't belong to them.
In 2021, the Denver Art Museum returned 4 artifacts to Cambodia after they were found to be linked to a man who was indicted by U.S. prosecutors. And in September, they announced they were working with the feds to return 5 sculptures back to their nations of origin. This was part of the museum's provenance research, something they did not want to talk on camera about. But do you use Elizabeth Campbell? Did. She has nothing to do with the art museum, but does run a provenance research program that trains people how to find the ownership history of art.
So museums, galleries should know that the items that they hold were not stolen in the past.
But the Denver Art Museum says Provenance research has nothing to do with the city's art, and they've only got one city-owned piece. The city auditor's office says that response is surprising, since their audit shows ownership of many pieces isn't clearly defined, and they've got a long list of pieces they believe the city owns. It's been nearly 3 years since that audit. The city's office says the museum has only completed 8 of the 21 recommendations that they agreed on. The Denver Art Museum says they're in the process of finishing the other recommendations. The auditor's office says if those recommendations aren't complete, come time to ask for city bonds for, improvements and whatnot, those incomplete tasks may be a topic of conversation. Kyle.
Julie said obviously there's a new mayor in town, but I'm just trying to imagine somebody trying to get his attention as he deals with homelessness and the migrant crisis to be like, hey, Mr. Mayor, can you pay attention to the art over here at the museum? But I guess somebody could bring it up to him.
Exactly. I think this has been such a long-running issue that the auditor's office hopes that this new administration does actually do something about this. They want attention to this. They want to make sure that these recommendations are completed.
All right, Julie Sarazari, good to have you on next. Yeah. Colorado's breweries are on track for their worst year for closures since the start of the pandemic. But economists say the industry is far from some kind of crash. This week, Oasis Brewing in Denver became the 31st Colorado brewery this year to announce that it's closing. It's not the worst year for closures on record, but the State Brewers Guild says it's a close second. The worst was 2020. 35 breweries closed that year. Economists who study the industry say this is more of a leveling off after a boom than it is a crash.
We see closings slightly outpacing openings, but there still is an inflow. So it's not like we're seeing breweries exit and nobody come in. And, to me, this market is becoming one that looks a little bit more like, say, the restaurant market, where people open, people close. Those numbers are roughly in balance. You really have to differentiate yourself and you have to get the business right to make it work. But it's not one that's collapsing or, this isn't a bubble bursting.
The Brewers Association says Colorado's brewery closure rate is sitting at about 5% per year. You heard Bart Watson talk about the restaurant business. 5% is relatively low compared to other hospitality industries like hotels and restaurants. They typically have about a 10% closure rate. Back in a moment with our quest to help get 10,000 gifts to 10,000 kids in Colorado and your feedback next. A Precious Child makes holidays happen for thousands of kids in Colorado. That nonprofit's goal is to get gifts for 10,000 children in need this year. They got those 10,000 referrals from agency partners within 20 minutes of opening the form. And that's when they started a supplemental list of other families in need. And those are the gifts that we can buy through this week's Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me in donating to this holiday effort that stretches up and down the Front Range. It touches so many families every year. A Precious Child has the organization and the infrastructure to pull this off if we can help buy those gifts. And for the first time, you can simplify your Word of Thanks generosity by setting up a monthly donation to the Word of Thanks Fund. You just set it up one time and your monthly donation will be automatically split between all the nonprofits we feature each week. You use the same QR code or text code to get there. A ton of you have asked about this for years. We're glad to finally be able to offer this option for folks who want to give week after week and not have to input that info. We'll see you next time.